I'm in San Antonio for NAREIT's REITwise, our 2019 Law, Accounting, and Finance Conference. Joining me today is Ron Bohlert, Sector Lead of Real Estate with the New York Stock Exchange. Ron, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Matt. It's great to be here.
Now, the IPO market, including for REITs, has shut down since a wave of activity in January of 2018. What factors do you think have driven that lack of IPO activity?
Most companies prefer not to IPO during turbulent or volatile times in the market. So if you think of institutions, underwriters, companies, they all want to have the most successful launch possible for their IPO. If you look into the beginning part of 2018, we had quite a bit of turmoil and volatility, which makes it incredibly difficult to get on the road and effectively price your offering. Now, when looking at volatility from a trader perspective, one of the most common metrics we look at, the CBOE Volatility Index, or the VIX for short. Now, without getting into the complex mechanisms that drive that, it's effectively a measure of 30-day forward-looking volatility for the market. Gives us an idea of what we're looking at. And historically, if we have a reading above 20, the IPO market slows down a little bit, and when the index is below 20, we tend to see IPO activity picking up. Now, to put it in perspective, in February, after that volatility, the VIX spiked to about 50. And then we had March and April at elevated levels up in the 30s. And while things did cool off a little bit in the summer, we got back down to a manageable 20 mark or so. The IPO market picked up a little bit. But then October, again, we saw that volatility creep back into the market, the VIX getting back up into the 30s for the majority of the fall season. So again, market really shutting down. And then we had another unforeseen issue heading into January with the government and SEC shutdown. Companies had their filings in, they had their numbers, and they're just waiting on word from the SEC, and they weren't really getting any movement. As a result, some of these companies saw their numbers go stale, and they're getting right back to the drawing board now.
Now looking forward, what are you seeing in terms of the likelihood that IPO activity starts to pick up for the remainder of this year?
Well, so far things are shaping up pretty well. We've had the S&P and the Dow and other major indexes rebounding off of lows, so valuations are getting better. The VIX has come back into the mid-teens over the last month or two. We also have the government open again for business. So, that being said, all these criteria are pointing towards what could be a very successful IPO season coming up.
Now speaking specifically about REITs, you talked about some of the volatility we saw in the fall, but the REIT market's seen a nice rebound here in 2019. What are some of the reasons behind that market activity in the REIT space?
Fortunately, we've seen a little bit of a turn this year back to the upside, back to some positive valuations. And again, one of the underlying backdrops is the Fed and their interest rate plan, where now we're looking towards what was going to be 3 to 4 interest rate hikes this year, and now they're looking to 0 to possibly a cut. So that, I think, is where the REIT space is starting to play in a little bit from that interest rate play.
And lastly, NAREIT and the NYSE are once again partnering on an IR Symposium that'll be held in June in conjunction with NAREIT's REIT Week. What are some of the topics that are going to be discussed at this year's event?
So we're really excited for the 3rd annual NYSE NAREIT REIT IR Symposium, and as you mentioned, it'll be on June 3rd, which coincides great with your REIT Week conference. So this year, one of the things we're going to be looking at, NAREIT has done a perception study with Revel Research, and what they're looking at is the generalist investor's view of REITs. So we're going to dive into some of those findings and see what has been happening from a generalist side with regards to what they're thinking of the REIT space. So a lot of really good insights that'll be coming out of that one. The second panel is going to be some research from FCLT Global, and it's focused on long-termism. How can we try to get these investors to look a little bit longer term when looking at their investment profile? And we're also going to touch on some recent trends in investor communications when it comes to the IR side of things. And then we'll be wrapping up with a CEO roundtable, getting a view from the top to see what CEOs consider to be an effective and efficient IR program.
Ron, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Matt.
For more information on this and other REIT news and analysis, be sure to visit NAREIT's website, REIT.com.